So now we have our first keynote, which is a tech leadership panel. So here we have assembled our the tech leadership across quite a few companies in the Hive, and we have Markov, Catch, Habu, Boomjam, Spectrum, and Sturdy represented. I'll ask each of our esteemed panelists to just quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with me grilling them. No. I'm just joking. Pankaj, why don't you start?
Yeah, I'm Pankaj. I'm from the Markov ML, one of the co-founders at Markov ML. I primarily work on product and technology. Before this, have been in industry for a while. Primarily deal with machine learning, NLP, and vision. I think that's pretty much it.
Hey everyone, I'm Anton Winter. I'm one of the co-founders and head of infrastructure for Catch. I've been doing operations, infrastructure stuff for a few decades, so been leading many teams in that space. Performance, scaling, self-healing infrastructure is kind of like my jam.
Hey guys, I'm Rupak Gupta. I'm the CTO of Habu. And I've been doing a lot of big data. I've been doing a lot of application. Before this also, I was also at Escalera. And it's good to see some of the Escalera folks here.
Hi everyone, my name is Max. I'm a co-founder at Boomjam, head of technology engineering. I don't know if this keeps changing.
It's okay. You write code.
Yeah, I still write code. I'm trying to get a bit out of this, but yeah, I've been in many sizes of companies, all the way from like first employee to myself, a founder, all by myself, and sad, to working at Google. Yeah, joined Boomjam last year, and I've been having a blast, and I'm happy to see everyone here.
I'm Bryce Cottom. I'm the principal architect at Spectrum Labs. And before this, I think a lot of us were at Salesforce and the Crux team. And so that's kind of how I know a good number of people here. And been doing big data and overlapping with data science for a while, applying it all at Spectrum.
I'm Nathaniel. I'm co-founder and CTO at Sturdy, and I started my life as a right? Yep. Yeah. As a hardware guy, computer engineering degree, everyone wanted me to do firmware software out of school. I was like, no way, I'm doing hardware. And I made the switch to software about 12 years ago. So.
Awesome. So as Bryce was saying, I've had the honor of working with quite a few of these folks in the past, and now as part of the work we're doing at Superset, I've worked closely with most of them in Superset too, across the various companies. So yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So the first thing that I wanted to pick up is, I think Nathaniel kind of mentioned this. He started as a hardware engineer, but I think me included, all of us kind of started as ICs. You know, we were software engineers in our first jobs, and then we made that transition from IC to manager, and then now tech leader. So I'd like you guys to just reflect on that transition. What made you want to get into management/tech leadership, and what was that journey like for you guys? Well, I'll start with you since you have the mic, Nathaniel.
Sure. I started as an IC, of course. My first job was at Motorola back when it was still a company doing cable modems, and then I went to a startup that didn't go anywhere, and then I worked for Intel for a while. And all of those jobs never quite did it for me, really. I was an individual contributor for all of it. At Intel, I looked at the culture, looked at the people who were my boss and even their boss, and said, boy, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do it. And the CEO of Sturdy is actually my cousin, Steve, and he wrote me an email one one day and said, how'd you like to run a software development team? And I was like, well, I don't know about that, but I don't want to do what I'm doing, so let me give it a try. And so I came on board, and I actually wrote some little apps in that company to start. We needed a Facebook app and stuff like that, and I did that all as an individual contributor. But then I ended up taking over a team, an offshored team in Shanghai, and then building a team in Fort Collins and actually onshoring work, and I liked it a lot. I still do write code and do everything else that needs to be done. So
Great. And Bryce, you're still an IC, from what I understand, right? So how did you make that decision to kind of stay on the technical track and be an IC?
Well, so first off, I guess I got to throw a disclaimer out, and it is very difficult to stay IT and get promotions. They're obvious. They're like, oh, okay, so you want to start managing? I'm like, no, God, no. I want to keep writing code, but just better and with bigger impact. So that's kind of tough. Nobody's really got that path nailed down, at least that I've seen. One of the reasons that I wanted to stay hands-on is that I think we'll touch on this. It's really easy to lose track of your cutting edge, it's easy to get out of date if you're not hands-on coding every day. And then you're managing people that at first, when you transition into, I've done it, I've managed people, you're mentoring, motivating them, giving them tips, directions, but then I've seen lots of managers slip and they're asking the people that work for them what the best way to do something is. And so I wanted to make sure I was in the code as much as possible. And it's satisfying to me. I mean, there are things that are satisfying in managing people and mentoring, but just doing the thing that motivates you the most probably is where I would focus in your journey.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I don't get to write code anymore, and I miss it. Max, how about you?
Well, I got into management pretty early on in my career. I think I was like 25 or something. I think I wanted, for some reason, like I'd play like sports and like music, and somehow I ended up always being like a lead or captain or some shit, and I don't really know why. But there was part of this where I kind of liked it. So, let's be clear, I kind of like calling the shots sometimes, like, hey, let's make this, and try to rally people around. So I do like this. And when I became a manager, I was like, finally, that first strike when you get out of college, like, hey, in 2 years I'll be manager, right? And I hate it. I cried myself several nights at the time. Like, I'm not getting it. I just want to talk to servers. You say this to code, it happens. You say this to a person, they do this. I don't get it. And so I really didn't like this. I wanted to go back to just writing code. I told my boss, half crying, like, I can't do this. I was trying to manage people as if they were driven by the same thing I was driven, and that doesn't work. And then I realized, oh, wait, like I need to be like, this person needs this person needs that. I need to understand people. And I guess stereotype of the engineer, I'm not that good at people at the time. I'm not sure I'm still good at it, but still. And so after this first hump, I started to be like, okay, well, now I'm starting to get not a handle of it, but start to get better at this. I was frustrated and I was not sure I was doing the right thing. I was like, if I was coding, I might be able to do it faster and everything. And my boss at the time said something I will always remember. Said, like, if you help people improve or increase the velocity or the quality by 10% across 10 people, that's more than what you'll ever be able to do by yourself. And this is like, okay, I can have a bigger impact mentoring people. I like talking. You've probably seen that since today. I like talking, but I also like teaching people, sharing my experience and all of this. And so I realized like I could have more impact than just being the one, clicking on the keyboard. And so, that's what kept me on that track without going back to IC. But I still like writing code. I still do write code.
Yeah, we know that, Max. So then let's go to Rupak. Rupak and I have been working together for a long time. I've seen the journey, so I'm interested to see how he describes his own journey now.
So for me, what happened was I was an IC, and then I started leading some projects, and that's how I was not really the manager, but I was leading. And then I realized, and I would echo some of the things that you said, is the multiplier effect is very important. Like if you make other people do better things, I think it's good for the company. So that's how it all started. I started managing. I agree with what has been said earlier, that writing code is actually easy. It's deterministic. Managing is actually very hard. So that was also a challenge for me. I've seen people of all kinds, and many have become my friends, whom I have managed, and they are still my friends. So it is a hard job, but I enjoy it. I love it when people in my team, they grow, they explore new things. And the funny thing is, I love it when they come and tell me things that I do wrong. And that's something that I really like. So
Great. Anton, how about you?
So like I said before, I've been doing a lot of operations, DevOps stuff for a long time. And I worked for companies like IBM Australia, a couple of big banks in Australia. And for some reason, I'm really passionate about Linux, for starters. And so when I started at IBM, I joined the IBM Australia and New Zealand Linux team. And all of a sudden, because I was so passionate and teaching other people in the team, I became tech lead. And that kind of kept on happening. All these other companies that I went to, I love mentoring people. I love learning. There's always something new to learn. It doesn't matter whether you're an expert in a certain field, there's always something new to learn. And that's kind of like what I do with my team and what I am passionate about when leading teams. And that's kind of like just how I went from job to job and company to company. I always became a leader of that team. And I think I'm the same. I didn't think I'd enjoy it at all. I thought it was really hard. But in actual fact, I do enjoy it. So it's kind of just a natural evolution that I went through. So it's been interesting.
Pankaj?
So I think as an IC, when the thought process is different, you get really, really good at doing one thing. When I say one thing, again, I'm saying you write darn good code, you understand your problem, but your impact radius still remains relatively narrower. Like there are so many things that are happening, that you want to try out, but you can't try out. And there's a lot of brainstorming that you want to have, but it doesn't happen because you're focusing on one thing and making sure it works. I think my transition has been mostly around, I was thrown into this tech lead, right? I graduated in like 2008 recession. So like half of my team was gone. And, I had to be an IC and also actually lead and deliver a project, which is really, really, really hard. But I think the impact that had, on the company, like, AMD launched their first, I came from the hardware background as a software engineer, but AMD launched their first GPU and CPU microarchitecture in 2009. And that was like done by a team of like 15 people on the software side. And it was like amazing because there is nothing that you can reference back to. That experience led me to realize that it's not about just doing work, but also increasing your impact. That can have more strategical impact on the company, on the businesses. It actually was one of the reasons AMD was saved. Not like I did everything, but the team that created that. And that made me realize it's not about just being good in one thing. It's about how you can make others good at what they do. And that's why. And again, I agree with Bryce on one thing. Like, it's very easy to kind of preach like what they should be doing. It's very important to understand what should be done. And even today, like, I write a lot of code and I spend a lot of time reading. So I'm still in touch, but it gets harder. Managing is hard.
No, that's great. I think a lot of these stories kind of resonate with me personally too, and how I took my journey from an IC over to doing whatever it is that I'm doing right now. The ability to have impact and at a distance, not direct impact, but through people, getting results through people, mentoring, motivating, those are all things that are super important as all of you kind of go on your journeys. You may be on different phases of that of your individual journeys, but that's, I hope that these themes around how do you get impact through people is something that you're taking away as these folks are talking about. So one thing that Bryce, I want to pick up one thing that Bryce brought up, which is that when you're an IC and you may be a senior IC, you're in the code. You're tasked with building things. So you naturally go in and research, what's the best way of doing this, what the latest technologies, et cetera, et cetera. But as you kind of start stepping away from it and start writing less code, keeping your saw sharp, keeping on top of all of the new things that are becoming available becomes a challenge. So how do you guys do that? I'll start with you, Rupak, since this time. But so how do you keep track of all the interesting stuff that's happening, and how do you keep your saw sharp?
So it is hard, at least because when you have a team to manage and all. But what I try to do is I try to read upon new things, and we also do a lot of discussions within the team, like what's going on, what are the new things that we should apply. We were just in the DBT sessions, and we have had some of the team members talk about it, and we have been discussing it, what we should do. So we've been doing reading. So that's how I try to do it. I read a lot of blog posts and all that around new tech. So that's what I do, but I also rely on my team to come up with, these are the things that are top of the, like, this is what people are talking about, and then I do research on that.
Anton actually is in a unique position because he does a very good job of mentoring, managing his team, as well as being an extremely hands-on individual contributor too. So how do you manage that, Anton?
It's hard. Simple as that. Trying to keep in touch with the technologies. I'm a tinkerer. I've got Raspberry Pi clusters at home. I've got temperature sensors scattered around the house to my wife's disgust. I find that I do a lot of tinkering and do a lot of that learning myself. And depending on, everyone has a different style of learning as well. For me, it's actually doing. So I find myself constantly doing stuff. And someone mentions like, oh, here's new technology or a new bit of software. And it's like, oh, that's cool. And I'll go home and I'll tinker with it just to make sure I know it, I understand it, and I can form a useful opinion. And then usually we go back and discuss that technology or whatever it is. So I try to do a lot of that.
Great. What about you, Max?
I think there's like two sides of this. On one end, you want to stay close to your team, where like right now might be too close and writing too much, but still you want to stay close because whatever technology exists out there, right? Like there's always a new shiny thing. Well, like we all JavaScript in our team, like back end, front end, the whole thing. There's always a new library, always something better than the previous day. And so you kind of want to stay close to what they're dealing with because maybe that's not the latest, but you need to understand the pain points, right? You can't just be like, well, go fix it, right? So you kind of need to be there, but also you want to see what's out there so you can change the way we build things. We're like, hey, well, we've been doing this way, we want to do it that way. So I mostly spend quite some time, like I have a few things on Twitter that I'm subscribing to. I have Hacker News has been a good way of like, and maybe I'm getting old because some people are like, oh, look at this new thing. Like, yeah, it reminds me of that old shit from 15 years ago. We've been there, done that. Like, why are we coming up with this yet again? It's a solved problem. So kind of have to take a bit of like, critical eye to that. But yeah, like trying to keep up with what's outside, but not always be like, hey, well, we've had this problem. Like, let's remove this. Now we're going to use this technology instead because that's not always the solution. So trying to balance that has been, the challenge, but that's how I'm trying.
Bryce, I don't know whether this question applies to you, but if you want to go have a go at it,
sure.
Free.
Yeah. Well, so I'll reflect things I've gleaned from Josh. Josh Newman is our CTO at Spectrum Labs, and he's remarkable at staying in the know and cutting edge. And the things that he shared with me that he does are things like he'll take a course and just audit it or whatever, but it's like a hands-on Haskell or, some data science, statistical analysis, whatever, that gets his hands into, in academia, a lot of it is cutting edge for a number of the domains that we work in. And he is also a tinkerer. So yeah, just making, it's like personal development time. It's kind of hard to manipulate your career and your workday to facilitate your own growth. But if you invest in it outside of that because you want to, you can. So it's continuous education.
Yeah. How about you, Nathaniel?
Anyone who's ever worked for me has heard me say we're all learning all the time, right? I have this picture that sometime in history you came out of school knowing what you need to know. I'm sure that's not really true, but I'm sure it was more true. And that's just not it. You're always learning whatever it is you're doing. So I really approach it with just problem solving. All I do is solve problems. And so if there's a problem I need to solve, I dig around. Where can I solve it from? The thing that I always try to kind of walk the line on is not chasing a shiny thing, but is this shiny thing actually providing any value, or is the old way perfectly fine and just doing it well the old way, which requires really digging into it and doing it right. It doesn't necessarily have to be the shiny thing if it's not getting you anything.
No, it's spot on. Pankaj, how about you?
Yeah, for me, it is mostly reading and then talking to people. I'll read a lot. One thing I've realized...
Well, actually, Pankaj doesn't read. He listens.
I listen. I read papers,
he
but I listen
clarified
to
for
books. Me. He always teases me with that. Okay. So I think it's more about being aware. Somebody told me a long time back, you can't be good at everything, right? But you can be dangerous. You can know enough to be dangerous. Means you know enough that you can talk intelligently about it, and that means you have to just know enough. So that's my focus. Like when I try to do something, I know like where my boundaries are, and I learn enough to be dangerous so that I can contribute. And there are people that we hire which are much, much better than I can ever be, and they take on from there. But I can have a discussion.
I guess I'd add one other thing too, is asking questions. I ask the people who work for me questions all the time, and they may not like it because I'm probing whether we're really getting to the bottom of this thing or not. I think that's really important to ask the questions that, again, as a leader, help you understand what's really going on, not just, the first page of the document or documentation or something like that. And I'm not saying that my people are trying to do that. I'm just saying that's important to ask questions.
No, that's so many themes kind of resonate with me. And I'll start with the last one. Folks who work with me know that I have these things that I say quite often. One is expectations reduce joy, as many of you know. And the second one is I'll always ask, what problem are you trying to solve? And I'll keep asking that question until I get a satisfactory answer. Because people are, to Nathaniel's point about asking questions, oftentimes people will come to me with just solutions. They don't know what problem they're solving. They just say, oh, we should do this. Well, why? What problem are you trying to solve? Yesterday at drinks, Devanshi asked me, like, as you go from being a junior engineer to a senior engineer, what changes? How should your mindset change as you're making that transition? And one of the things I said to her was, you just need to ask questions. Why are we doing this? Why not the other thing? How is this better? What are the alternatives? Like all these questions, if you ask them, it actually gives you a lot more context for why you're doing what you're doing. Some of these stories around like tinkering and all of that also resonate with me because, as I said, I miss writing code. So early on during our superset journey, I would try and find one module, one thing that I could build in whatever company we were working on in that tech stack, so that I could familiarize myself with what was going on. And then I gave up. It was just too much going on across too many companies for me to keep track of. The other thing that some of the folks mentioned over here is these days the number of technologies that are available to solve a particular problem they're just immense. Just starting with programming languages. When I was growing up, there were just two to pick from if you wanted to build enterprise software. You were either a Java person, or you were a Windows then .NET was coming out, like component object model, the Microsoft. You were either Java or Microsoft. That was it, right? And so I was a Java person. And everything we did was Java. And But now it's like, oh, do you want to do Java? Oh, you have to write so much code. Oh, what about Golang? Yeah, but it's still too verbose. What about Python? Not fast enough. Oh, how about JavaScript? Yeah, it's good, but then it's for kids. All of these things, right? And by the way, these are not my opinions. These are not my opinions. I'm just saying that there are, and then you have Haskell and you have Rust and every language that comes out, of course, there's a way to do web application development in that language too. So like, oh, we're going to write web services in Rust. Really? So what I've started to do to the point about asking questions is, okay, first, great. Does it solve these problems? What are the trade-offs? And you're going to support it, right? So great, go do that. So that's the strategy I've started to take. And the way it works for me to keep my saw sharp is I just learn. Oh, you're using Node.js. Wow. What tools are you using? Why is that good? So all of these things then, again, just starting from asking questions and letting people teach you is the strategy that I use these days to keep my saw sharp. But lots of interesting perspective from our panel on that one. I want to pick up one thing that I think Nathaniel mentioned. As you are learning, you want your team to learn and grow as well, right? So what? Now this is for the folks over here. How do you encourage your team to do that? Do you use any patterns? Do you use any frameworks? Are there processes you set up? How do you think about that, and how do you put that into play? Start with you.
I think part of the previous question as well is one of my approaches to doing things, to actually writing code, is when there's something either big or that I'm uniquely qualified for, or that I don't want to waste someone else's time iterating on until it can be gotten to be right, is I'll dig into it and use it as a template. So, I write some fairly crappy code that someone can put in the right place, that I can't be in because I'm not a software developer every day, day in and day out. So I try to essentially template things out and then describe why I did something, what I've done, what I think should be done next, sort of thing. We also try to do a lot of presentations by individual contributors so that people are on board with all the different things that are going on without knowing all the details of everything, right? I think that's really important, both for everyone to have an idea of what's going on at a technical level, but also for people to be able to say what they did and say why they did it. And when you do that, you get a better understanding of what you did. So I think that's really important.
Cool. Bryce?
So I want to restate the question, make sure I've got it right. How do you get your team to be educated and motivated and things like that? Okay, so from my perspective, I'll overlap with some of I'll do an example implementation of a pattern or a setup that we want to do, and ask people like, okay, yeah, just do these other things, but that way. And that's one way. But another one that's interesting for me, because nobody right now reports to me. I still have one-on-ones with a lot of people, and I'll talk with them about what they're working on, what challenges are you running into, and lots of times I'll be really candid and be like, I'm struggling with this. I'm not quite sure how to pass these parameters right, or whatever. The CLI is clunky for that, and we'll examine solutions together. Sometimes I learn from what they're experimenting with, and sometimes I can share something that I'm doing that may lighten their burden. So one of the struggles for me is giving up ownership of code that I've laid. I'm extremely picky on my code. And so that's really difficult, but it is really rewarding to see somebody see things that you laid an example for and say like, oh wow, that's a cool way to do it. I'm going to do it that way from now on. Or oh, I enhanced it this way. Check that out. And I get the PR. I'm like, dude, that's pretty cool. So
cool. Max?
I would have a long list here, and I don't know if all of those work. I think there are there are two things I'm trying to do. The first one is to never, hey, do it this way because I say so. I'm doing the same thing with my kids, and that takes a lot longer to get anything done. But it's the same thing, right? If you want people to understand the why, if you want people to get more seniority, you can't just be like, oh yeah, trust me, do this. You have to explain the why. And so that goes with me being super available if they have more questions and all that. And the other part of that is to, the other one I want to mention is sometimes letting them not fail, but spend more time on things. So it's always easy to be around oh yeah, just ask me when you need, and then you give them just the answer. But that doesn't mean that they learn through the process. So I'm sure the team knows that. But sometimes we're yeah, try to figure out and let me know. And then instead of okay, what? Giving the answer right away, I'm okay, what are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do it this way? So we try to crack the code in what's limiting them at that time, or why they're not getting to what they want to do. And so obviously from a pre-order stage, things takes a bit longer. I could go in there and be hey, look, I'm going to code it for you, right? But that doesn't build the team. That doesn't build that doesn't help the multiplier effect that I was mentioning earlier. So this is really about helping them where they are, but just through them, having them think about what they're doing and just ask, a bit like you say, hey, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this way? Keeping asking questions, but also allowing them to ask me a shit ton of questions as much as they need.
Rupak, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, I think there are a couple of things that we do. So one is we have these weekly sessions that the engineering team does where they show what they've done, and we encourage when they're coming up with new ideas. And sometimes we have very interesting discussions there, which end up with them going and figuring things out. So that is one thing that we do. The other thing we do is I believe every engineer they have some superpower. They are really passionate about one thing more than the other. So what we try to do is take that, and taking that into consideration, how can we can use it in the context of the product, what we're building, and use that superpower. So that's what I try to do. Most times I think I don't succeed completely, but it takes in the right direction. So
what is Tony's superpower?
Tony's superpower is he can figure out any problem, be it code, life, or anything else.
So if you guys haven't spent time with Tony Lamb from Habu, I highly encourage you to do so. Tony, the guy with... Yeah. Tony is one of the most colorful characters I've come across in my professional life. We've been working together for how long now, Tony? Over 20 years? Yeah, over 20 years. So...
Sorry, one more thing about Tony, now that we're talking about Tony.
See?
He is under extreme stress. He will laugh and he will joke around under extreme stress. I've never seen that anywhere. I get stressed out pretty easily. I've seen people get stressed out. He will just laugh it out and he will do the work. So
this morning, as I think is the case with all of us, right, or all of you, there's a real business going on. Right? Customers using products, software, bugs being found, issues being reported, etc. So Habu, I'm still on the Habu Slack channel. So they've come up with a whole protocol. Oh, if Sev 0 happens, do this. Sev 1 happens, does this, or do this. So I asked Tony this morning, Tony, how many Sev 0s reported? He says 0. So how come? Because I decide the priority. So there are many more jokes like that that Tony will share with you if you spend some time with him. So anyway, Anton.
So it's all about patterns. I have opinions, strong opinions, but they're loosely held, right? So I kind of align that everyone has that superpower and are passionate about various different things. So we do a lot of proof of concepts. If you're passionate about a particular technology, why don't you go set it up and tell us about it and see where it fits and where it doesn't and what the sharp edges are. And that's kind of how a lot of our projects evolve. We find out whether it's really shitty or if it's actually a great tool for us to convert to. And we're actually doing that now. there's tools that we've used in the past where they were great at the time, but new ones have come out. And again, if people are passionate about it, and we've got a certain pain point, we spend that time and actually doing a proof of concept and try and figure it out and let the team form an opinion. We also do these things called RFCs, requests for comments. They're basically documentation that outlines the problem, what they're trying to solve, what some of the solutions are. We go through the cost analysis and things like that, depending on what the actual thing is we're working on. But it allows the team to contribute to that, and they can provide their own opinions and comments and feedback. And maybe they've used that tool in the past, and they can actually provide that feedback to the team. But it allows the team to take control of that particular thing. And I'm not the one saying, do this, do that, and whatever else. So it allows the team to contribute really well. And after that, it's usually a learning process. We do brown bags and we show off the technology and the rest of the team learns about it. So that's kind of the pattern that we use.
Cool. Pankaj?
I think at Markov, what we have been trying to do is, I think there are two things. One is a culture and other is the process. Culture is important because if you set up the culture where people are free and they feel comfortable asking questions, then that's a win. And it's a hard one. No question is dumb. So first setting up that culture. The second question is always asking why. So and when we say why goes from, an engineer, right now to the executive leadership. Always ask why. And you get answers. And, that's the culture part. The second part is the process part. So process, too many processes are bad, but some processes are good. So there are some processes that we set up right from the beginning when there were two people writing code, me and Chris, which is we design everything through a design doc, and then we discuss it as a team. And every decision that we make is actually on a doc. And every decision that we disagree on is also on the doc. So that's one. The second thing we do is that whenever we make mistakes, we actually have correction of errors because you learn from your mistakes and we will make mistakes. So first admitting that we will make mistakes, but the goal is not to repeat those mistakes. So we have something called correction of errors that we write, we document, and we discuss as a team how it could have been prevented. But after that, we have action items on that. That, okay, this is how it has to be corrected, and then ideas are welcomed. The third thing that we do is we continuously learn about a domain that we are new to. Markov is at a complex position because we work on multiple machine learning projects as well as complex distributed systems, and not everyone is aware of everything. So what we do during the design docs, we also share the references, and we are supposed to read it before we go and be in the meeting. Meeting is not for, when you go into a meeting, you should know what you're talking about and what you want to get out of it. So there's also an agenda decided, what we want to get out of this meeting, and is there, how many more such meetings are required. So, it's still getting better at that, not there yet. But these processes help us to be in control and, more importantly, being aware. So that's what we have set up.
So I want to latch onto a couple things that you said there. One, culture, and then errors, detecting, having some kind of reflection. I don't think enough can be said about the culture to enable learning and experimentation. And so two things that we do at Spectrum for this is look for people who hold themselves accountable. And that makes it so that we can have really open, blame-free retrospectives on some kind of outage. You just go up there, you're like, yeah, shoot, I deployed that version and this bad thing happened. All right. So nobody's like, well, it's messed up because of you. That cultural thing is really, really important for letting people experiment and grow. If they feel afraid to be putting forth anything other than their something they've already done, then you're not going to get anything new.
And so I'm so glad Bryce kind of picked up the mic from that, because Bryce said Josh Newman is Spectrum Labs' CTO, and the culture, the reason why people over here are all talking about the importance of culture is because it starts at the top. You have to establish the culture you want to create right at the top. You have to act in a way where you are holding yourself accountable for these types of things. So my favorite I have many Josh stories. One of my favorite ones is Josh used to work on the this piece of code, JavaScript code, we call it the control tag, that would be deployed on our customers' websites. So our JavaScript code was running on all of the top websites of the world at Crux. CNN, New York Times, BBC, Wall Street Journal, you name it, you name a large publisher, 98% we were there, right? And so one day what happened was Josh ended up pushing deploying some code to production that resulted in one of the publishers, just one, losing some revenue because there was a weird IE6 bug that caused ads to not show under some weird condition. It was not suddenly pages crashing down or whatever. It was a nuanced thing. But as soon as it happened, as soon as we find out, Josh pulls me into a room and says, "Sorry, dude, I fucked up." And like, okay, let's go fix it, and we move on, right? So there was that first there was ownership and accountability. Like, I did it, and I'll fix it. And so that's the kind of culture that he comes from, that type of culture or that personal causal response, holding himself accountable, and that's the culture he's created at Spectrum, and that's what we all should try and strive to do across everything we're doing across the Hive. So we might be running short on time. Nick, is it okay if we go a few minutes over? Yeah, okay. So I want to pick up one question that was submitted by someone in the Hive. I don't know who. And the question is, what is a piece of technology that you wish you could have built? All right, now you guys have had 5-10 seconds to think, and there we go. Max wants to go first.
So I think one that I wish I was smart enough to build is Spanner. So Spanner is a globally consistent database that Google has built, and they could only build that because all the servers are all in sync. Like there's like some, I don't know, there's like a Rethink DB. There's like some open source products out there trying to do this, but basically all those problems that I faced many times of like, oh, I need to have my data sharded in different locations in the world, and they're not consistent, and like you can think about all the way to like companies like selling physical products, right? Keeping stock, like everything is sharded, everything is local, right? And those guys, they came up with a database that's just globally consistent, like all the AC, all the transaction stuff works globally, and like that's just the kind of thing that blows my mind more than crypto and shit, because it's just like that. The precision of all this machinery to work together is just insane to me. But yeah.
Anyone else want to have a go? No? I can start. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it? Okay, cool. One that comes to mind, not quite as impactful or globally distributed as Spanner, is gRPC. I started a pattern before I knew about it that was pretty similar, but it wasn't nearly as good, and it didn't have the right serialization. But looking at how elegant and powerful it is cool. I wish I was involved in that project.
Pankaj?
I mean, people that know me know that I talk a lot about NLP because I'm passionate about it. One thing I'm passionate about is actually, adding reasoning to anything that is generated, like generation of text. I wish, and this happened soon, I transitioned from machine translation world to more into the conversational AI world. The revolution started then around 2014 when these technologies were like transformers came in, sequence model came in. I wish I could be part of that, but I wasn't. But I did some catch up, which is good.
It took me a minute, but I had to think back a long ways. Essentially, GIS and mapping. Way back when I was in school, there was a company that came out of my school that was doing that, and I was like, "Oh, I missed the boat. Too bad." And the actual truth to that is you never really missed the boat on anything in technology. I could have gone and done it and probably would have enjoyed it.
So for me, it is actually explainable AI, which I know there's a lot of work going on. Some people have done some parts of it, but that's something that we used to talk about it, but I never got a chance to build it. So that would have been a cool thing to do.
You should read the book that's in your swag bag.
For me, it'd be Kubernetes. Yeah, I know, right? Back at running individual servers, and I like my sleep. I don't want to get woken up in the middle of the night to reboot a machine. So if I had that orchestration a few decades ago, that'd be awesome, right? It's great that we're there now, but I just wish I had that earlier. That'd be my one.
So I have three things, because always there are three things. One is Linux. The second is, like Nathaniel said, maps. I'm just amazed at how Google Maps works. And it's one thing to be amazed in the US, but you go to India, and this happened in 2016. So a reasonable while ago, actually. And Google Maps has evolved significantly in the last 6 years. But in 2016, I went to India, and not all streets in India or in Delhi even are named. Or if they have names, they're like obscure names that, little streets will be called something obscure and whatnot. And the directions that Google Maps produced go from point A to point B in Delhi were just spot on accurate. And I was amazed at how they could do that. So Google Maps, like mapping GIS is one thing. And the third thing is all of the rocket science that occurs to send rockets into space. Like the amount of coordination that needs to happen for the rocket to just take off, combination of math and CS and all of that coming together is just fascinating for me. If you guys haven't seen Hidden Figures, I highly recommend it. It goes and explains a little bit of the tech and the math behind rocket science. When we were at Rapt, we had a colleague who passed away recently, Leo Dagum, who some of us used to work with. He actually used to work at NASA. And he told me that, what we are doing at Rapt is more complicated than rocket science. I never believed him. So those are three of my things that I wish I could have been a part of building. All right, I think maybe I would have one more question. Nick?
We can open it up to the audience.
Sure, yeah. Let's open it up to the audience.
I know it's not. Hello. All right. Is this working? So it's not exactly like technology related, but I just kind of would like to. I'm just wondering about like kind of contrast of managing people versus like managing tasks that need to be accomplished, and as well as like kind of any like difficulties with like change of discourse, because now your responsibilities include talking to people and not necessarily have the same like career experience or context as you had previously, such as like business or like product.
I'll start. I mean, I think I find that for all of us, we have some common experiences, and it's relatively easy to get to those experiences. So that's sort of where I head is not life experiences so much as like technical experiences, right? What are you working on? What did you work on before it? Oh yeah, I worked on that, and so.
One that I'll speak to from mentoring anyway, you said the contrast between managing tasks getting done versus managing people. And people, you get to watch them grow as you mentor them. A task has a completion, and then it's done growing. There's maybe a new task, but people keep evolving, and it's very rewarding to see people that you're collaborating with to build them up and have them latch on.
Nick took my mic, sorry. If I can just double down on that to the point about mentorship is extremely, extremely rewarding because you can see the journeys that people have been on. And one of the things that is extremely gratifying for me and Tom is to see all of the growth that so many of you have gone through over the last however many years that we've been working together. Both of us are really, really proud of all that many people on the stage here and many people in the room have achieved in the last however many years that we've been working together. So that part is extremely gratifying. Just to double down on what Bryce said. Anybody else wants to add to? Yeah.
I think it's also about you hire right people who have a growth mindset, because tasks, as Bryce was saying, they evolve. And people kind of remain constant. You want people to be constant, but you want people to adapt to the situations, like adapt to tasks and get them done. So yes, as I said, the mistakes would be made, but people who acknowledge those mistakes and get better at every step, those are the people we tend to hire, and then everything becomes relatively easier over time. So you manage tasks, and when you manage tasks well, when you manage people, you are automatically managing your tasks well.
Yeah. I do have a question, right? So, as you all are founders or either founding engineers, right? So, and you might be passionate about the code that you have written or the techniques that you have introduced, and as you hire new engineers who who at times might have some better opinions of the way things should be done. So, can you give me an honest opinion on how do you let go things and say, okay, I was personal about it, but maybe he or she is giving me a better idea about it. So, yeah. Give me an honest opinion, not not a typical bookish. Yeah,
So I mean, you all have joined teams, right? And you look at what exists, and you're like, oh, well, that's not that good. And I think we all have that issue of saying something is bad without really understanding the why. Like, what's been built was probably the best thing that they could build with what they knew at the time. Hindsight 2020. It's easy to come back and be like, he could have done better. For the most part, like, there's new technologies that came out in between that solve that. So there's always something, like, I would say, as a team lead, or like, okay, well, maybe that's a better idea, but it's not just, there's more to this. Like, how much is that going to cost to switch? Is the, like, what is the added value, right? Because you're not talking about building something new, you're talking about replacing something that probably already works. And the old saying, if it's not broken, it's not worth fixing. And so there's a bit of this where I'm trying to balance this, like, yeah, well, it's great, that's a better idea, but right now maybe we're not going to do it. So you always want to balance and play this back. You also don't want to latch too much on your own code just because you wrote it. I don't think I ever been in my career when I look back at my code like, oh, that code was great. Like, there's always code that I'm like, I could have done so much better, and that just means that I've grown. And I recommend all of you, if you look back at a code from 6 months ago and you feel this is the best code you've written, you're not growing enough. You need to look back at this stuff and be like, I could have done better. And so the honest opinion is that, right? Like, so those people may be right, they may be wrong. You need to take that into account. If I'm still latching on code that I written a long time ago, and I feel like some of that can be core and very important, I'm going to defend it. But if it's just like, yeah, if there's another way, I'm working on hopefully bigger problems now. So it's about really like, hey, my priorities have changed. It's your problem now. This is why we hired you. Yeah, if you think there's a better way, but let's talk about it. It's not just about replacing it with something else just for the sake of it. We want to have that, like, be that a discussion and something a good decision, not just because, hey, that's better, right? So if it's the right decision to do, yeah, for sure. Like, there's no hurt feelings, at least on my end.
So you wanted to know the honest answer, right? The honest answer is that, and I think I'll take the liberty of speaking for everyone over here. The honest answer is that people in this position want to hand off the code as quickly as possible. And the reason for that is that we really don't want the maintenance overhead. The not just maintenance as in, oh, this is legacy or whatnot, but evolution and whatnot, right? So we want the code off our hands as quickly as possible. And we want to pay attention to what Max said, which is, yeah, coming up and saying, oh yeah, of course, there's a better way of doing this right now, but you have to understand and evaluate all the trade-offs. right? How much time is it going to take? What other things need to be changed? So if you want to have that discussion, I think everybody is extremely willing to kind of go down that road. There is absolutely zero attachment. Of course, we're proud of course, I think everybody would be proud of what they've done, but at the same time, in their heart of hearts, I bet you, they are eager to find someone like, oh, I'll take this off you. And I speak from experience.
I think it is part of our job, I guess, is to evaluate. Refactoring is a part of life, and you need to do it. If you don't do it, you just have the same old thing forever, and it's not going to scale, right? But part of our job is saying no, unfortunately, and making the evaluation. Can we do that right now? 95% of the time that someone says, "Oh, we could do this better," I'm like, "Yeah, we could." And I'm not saying 95%. I'm like, I'm not sure about that. But 95, I'm like, yeah, we could. Let's see where we should prioritize that. And the honest part is, if you really, really push and push and push, eventually I get really pissed off.
So for me, I think the impact, the trade-offs. I think what has been talked about is absolutely right. I'll give an example. I think it was at Habu when we were using Auth0 as our kind of SSO implementation, and we were discussing, hey, should we move our entire authorization and authentication service to Auth0? That's the right thing to do, but is it the right thing to do right now? It's a better mousetrap, but do we need it right now? So those are the kind of conversations that ultimately define what you should do.
There's a quippy thing we have in Spectrum that we say, perfect is the enemy of profit. So if like, oh, this could be better if we just blah, 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 you're never going to get over the line. Sometimes you got to accept, yeah, it could be better, but it's doing the thing. So
I just want to add one more thing. There was a question before, like, what's how you grow from junior to senior engineer and then to leadership. So junior engineers are really passionate about writing code. So a junior engineer always talks about how much code he has written or she has written. Senior engineer is always proud of telling how much lines of code that person has removed. Okay, and leadership is like, I don't even want to talk about code, right? Talk me about like, what are you doing and how are you actually impacting this company, right? So if somebody is too emotional about the code, that is wrong leader, right? And at the same time, if the person is saying yes to every changes that engineers are proposing, that's a wrong leader as well. The reason is engineers by design are motivated by change, but companies are not built for change. Companies are built for impact. So you have to see what changes you are doing that will have an impact. Because if there is no impact, there is not going to be any code left. If there's no code there's no, as you said, like perfect is enemy of profit. There's not going to be that job either. So you have to make that trade-off. And that's the hardest thing to do. But you have to, and the problem is when leaders take those calls, they are responsible for making those calls. And they have to live by their decisions. So it's even harder, just to tell you.
I'd just add one thing too about mentioning, becoming a senior or, individual contributor and moving up towards senior and leading, is once you start to be able to make those evaluations well yourself on what needs to be refactored, you get to just go do it. You hardly have to say anything. You're like, oh, well, I know my boundaries and I'm going to just do this. So.
Great. I think that is it. We don't have time for any more questions because I think people are hungry and lunch is outside. So I want to thank Pankaj, Anton, Rupak, Max, Bryce, and Nathaniel for joining us. Lots and lots of amazing insight. I hope you guys took notes. Pen and paper has been provided or whatever mechanism you choose. But thank you guys for sharing your perspective. Really fun conversation. And yeah, let's go eat.